Good afternoon, everyone. Thank you for tuning in for King Solomon's Wisdom, episode number 1. My name is Rock Stevens, and this is my co-host,
Brian Pelaez.
And today we have an absolutely incredible guest, very highly esteemed, not only in Texas Masonry, but recognized nationally and internationally as well. This is our Most Worshipful Grand Master, Paul D. Underwood of the Most Worshipful Grand Lodge of Texas. He's had quite the Masonic resume for his background, and we're absolutely excited for him to be on our show today. Some of the kind of different distinguished points and positions that he served in from before. He was raised at the age of 21 in Mesquite Lodge. He served as Worshipful Master. He's been in Masonry over 47 years now. He's received his 40-year pin, as well as serving from District Deputy Grand Master, presidents of several different boards of governors, different positions from Ex-Students Association, from the Masonic Common School, which we're going to be able to talk about today as well, and from different positions as well as the potentate for the shrine, and many, many other positions we're going to consider today as well. But just to give a quick intro, this is going to be the Most Worshipful Grand Master, Paul D. Underwood. So thank you so much for joining us.
Honored to be here.
Absolutely. And I think, Brian, you wanted to mention also a point about the title. And when we say, for the lodge level, Worshipful Master, or for the state level, Most Worshipful Grand Master, tell us a little bit about what does that mean in that distinction, that title?
No, I wanted to preface and get everybody acquainted that it's not necessarily a term of worship, but rather it's a term of
endearment and respect.
Endearment and respect, right, to the office, right? Respect to the office that, he's the one that's leading the whole state for the year, and that not everybody gets to do that, but also that it's a huge responsibility. So we appreciate your work and effort, and thank you.
So, Most Worshipful, tell us from the young age going through the Masonic Common School all the way up to today, tell us some of the light and some of the knowledge that you've gained from the Masonic Common School.
Well, of course, and my father was a Mason. That sort of provided my pathway to attend Masonic Common School. And of course, tragically, with his death is what precipitated me and my two brothers going there. I went there at the age of 10 from a very modest family. My life changed dramatically. It put me on a level playing field with everybody else there. We all came from similar backgrounds, but we were all on the level there.
Right.
The Masonic term, but nevertheless, there we were introduced to the word being on the level.
Right.
And had a fine education provided for them, and gave really a tremendous education, and taught us at an early age independence. Because even though you were provided for by adults, you were still, to some extent, you were independent. You didn't have a mother or a father to go comfort you whenever something might have gone otherwise than what you wanted. It was a fantastic experience. I say that it literally saved my life, because had it not gone there, my life would have turned out much differently.
And I know you mentioned the term on the level, so that's something that not only is rooted in Masonry, it's something that people might have heard that term outside of Masonry. Tell us a little bit about the Masonic roots and what you learned, and what does that mean? How does that transcend for today's version of modern Masonry? What does that mean to be on the level?
Just means that when we walk into a Masonic meeting, that we leave our titles and our positions and our wealth and our poverty at the door. We're all equals.
Absolutely.
That's on the level in a pure sense.
Yeah, absolutely. And so just to kind of give a little bit of a background, and also to give you a modern version of that today as well. Brian is actually the secretary of our lodge. I'm a past master, and as the Most Worshipful Grand Master, and everyone, even down to the newest initiate that might be someone that just joined, as they become a Master Mason, and then we all have equal votes. It's something that's also important that I've seen in a day-to-day life, whether we're visiting lodges or if it's something that it's someone within our own lodge. We treat everyone as equals. We treat everyone with respect, from the very highest all the way down to the newest initiate, with respect, to make sure that everyone is, again, on that level.
So speaking on the level and taking it back to the Masonic Common School, I was really curious. I wanted to ask, you growing up with Freemasonry, surrounded your whole life, I'm sure at some point when you traveled outside the Masonic Common School, you've met plenty of people who've never heard of Freemasonry. And so what do you tell them? How do you, condense, your whole life of Freemasonry to somebody who's never heard of it before?
That's a challenging question, but what I like to describe Masonry is is how you live your life. If you live your life in consistent with the principles of Masonry, that by just definition says that you're living your life as a good man, given to society and with the goal and hope that you leave this world a little bit better than you found it. Simply put, a Mason is a good man how he lives his life.
I like that. And it also touches on to having Masonic values. So and it doesn't necessarily have to be a Mason in order to live Masonically. And so, kind of touching back and forth between, what makes an honorable man and an honest man someone that not only could be qualified or be worthy of the fraternity, but you can live Masonically without being a Mason.
Absolutely. And that man that is living his life consistent with Masonic principles, he very well just doesn't know that our fraternity exists, but that man living the way he lives his life and seeing what Masonry represents, it would automatically be, I think, two magnets that attract each other.
Right. Yeah.
And but they have to know we exist first.
Exactly.
Curious. So for the gentleman who, is involved in his community, who lives Freemasonry, but is not necessarily a Mason, what would entice him to become a Mason if he already lives his life as righteous as he does?
Well, I like to say that, of course, we have an expression that we use that Masonry takes a good man and makes him better. And I like to add to that and say that Masonry brings good men together. With that synergy, those good men do good deeds and good work for society. And so it's, so to speak as well, you're only as good as the company you keep. If you're hanging around with solid men, you're going to feed off each other, and together you're going to make each other better.
Iron sharpens iron.
I like that.
Right.
And speaking of doing, bringing good men together and helping to make a bigger impact, I know you've been a part of several different organizations, from the Scottish Rite to the Shriners, from different portions, whether it's the Commandery, the Chapter Council, Allied Masonic Degrees. But Shriners Hospital is one of those I want to speak of because you are also a Shriner and you've also served as potentate, which is the presiding officer within that body. The Shriners Hospital does a lot of incredible things. Tell our viewers a little bit about what does that mean from the Shriners Hospital, and what does it mean to be a Shriner, the way that you can give back to the children?
Well, first I'd like to say, my brother, is that many people don't know that every Shriner is a Mason.
Right. Yep.
It's a prerequisite to becoming a Shriner.
Right.
Because the Shrine organization says we want good men to be our members, and we're going to let the Masonic fraternity vet our membership before they become one of us. So that's a tremendously important piece.
Right.
But with that said, then these Masonic Shriners, if you will, the benevolence is helping a needy child medically, right. Whether it be a burn hospital or an orthopedic hospital. And I had the honor of serving for 9 years on the Board of Governors of the Houston Orthopedic Hospital.
Wow.
And, every month when I went there for a board meeting, it never got old. That you would go in there and you'd walk through the lobby and there'd be patients there, and it always reminded you of why you were doing what you were doing. And it was another example of how Masonry and Shriners, but Masonry, giving back to society to make it better than we found it.
Absolutely. No, and I like that. And on the flip side, there's also the Scottish Rite Hospital, which you're also a Scottish Rite Mason. So tell us a little bit about kind of the distinction and what's the difference between either the two hospitals or even just the two bodies in and of itself.
Well, the Scottish Rite portion of Masonry is they like to pride themselves. We like to pride ourselves as Scottish Rite Masons as being the college of Masonry. The and that it's presented with a bunch of several Masonic degrees that go up through the 32nd degree. But it's more learning, more education, more enlightenment in what our fraternity, collective fraternity, is all about.
Right.
And the benevolence of Scottish Rite is the orthopedic hospital in Dallas, and there's also one just north of Dallas that has just been opened. They treat orthopedic children from around the world as well. First class, world class medical treatment for children. And all these hospitals we talk about are provided to these children and families around the world.
Right.
That with no expectation of payment by the family.
Right.
It's our gift to society.
And I think that's an excellent point. I know something that was also impressive to me. I think there was something you've also been a big part of with the transportation and helping, because for the Shriners, like you're mentioning, it could be close by, it could be a different city, or it could be out of the state.
Right. They have to travel to wherever they have to get to finally get to their help.
Mm-hmm.
I did want to put a pin for a second in charity, and I wanted to go back to on the level.
Mm-hmm.
A lot of people talk about Scottish Rite Masons as, 32nd and 33rd, and what degree are you? But as Masons, we know that the 3rd degree is the highest level. You could talk a little bit about why is that, and why is it that the 3rd degree is what unites us?
The 3rd degree or the 33rd degree?
The 3rd degree.
3rd degree. That's the, if you will, that's the working level of Masonry.
Right.
That the entered apprentice Mason, as well as the fellowcraft Mason, are those steps that we take along the path to reach the point of Master Mason. Master Mason, in fact, defines that not that you're finished learning or finished growing, but that you're at the working class level in our fraternity, that you have all the rights and privileges of all the activities that go on in the lodge.
So what I wanted to touch base is that, some people might find it a misconception that, oh, what degree are you? Are you a 27th or you're a 42nd? And so that the numbers don't necessarily mean what level they are in Freemasonry, but rather that the 3rd degree really is the ultimate capitulation to the degrees, at least at the Blue Lodge level.
It is. It is the highest level you can reach in Blue Lodge Masonry. And all of these other bodies, they're called appendant bodies, whether it be the Scottish Rite, the York Rite, or Shrine, Eastern Star. All of those are wonderful organizations, but they're appendant bodies of the Grand Lodge of Texas. And it doesn't make them less, but it makes them organizationally a part of the Grand Lodge of Texas.
And speaking of those as well, so I know we referenced the 3 degrees in Blue Lodge, so entered apprentice, fellow craft, and master mason. As you continue through that line, the people can also serve through a line of officers at their own lodge that include a lot of the traditional ones you might hear from, treasurer and secretary and vice president and president equivalent. We have our own titles for those, as we mentioned, worship master. Out of all the lodges in Texas, and there's hundreds of them, correct me if I think there's about 700 or some odd number around there. All of those lodges are also sectioned into regions, or what we call districts. And then out of all those districts, they're also going to they have a leadership essentially for the state level. And for Blue Lodge Masonry, the highest level is the state. Is that correct?
Yeah.
And so within that, it has its own levels of leadership, if you will. And a lot of our viewers might not be Masons, so just to kind of break that down a little bit as well. Inside of Texas Grand Lodge, the most worshipful Grand Lodge of Texas, tell us a little bit about the leadership, the different positions, and how you've served kind of through the positions ever since, from the Grand South all the way to the current position today.
There are 6 statewide elected positions in the Grand Lodge of Texas. There are the Grand Secretary, just like a Secretary of the Lodge, the Grand Treasurer, just like a Treasurer of the Lodge. And those are year-to-year elected positions that people frequently hold those positions for several years.
Right.
They don't have to, but they're elected each year. But typically, just like in a lodge, they would hold that position for more than 1 year. Whereas the other 4 statewide elected positions are Grand Junior Warden, Grand Senior Warden, Deputy Grand Master, and Grand Master. each one of those don't automatically progress, but they're elected each year to advance. And essentially they do advance, but there's no certainty they will advance.
Right.
But those are what's called the Grand Lodge trustees. And those 6 presiding members of the Grand Lodge trustees provide the leadership and direction for our fraternity in between grand sessions, which we have once a year in January.
Right.
That year in January, the membership gets together, as we will this coming January, and we will enact legislation, consider legislation that will impact the way our fraternity moves forward through the next year. Mm-hmm. So that's the I guess you'd say the governing board, if you will,
right,
of Grand Lodge of Texas. But then beneath that, there are a host of statewide appointed positions, which include everything from a grand chaplain to a grand orator and grand marshal and so forth. But those positions also are complemented by the district deputy grand masters of the Grand Lodge of Texas. And those are appointed by the Grand Master. This year we have 154 district deputy grand masters in Texas. And those district deputy grand masters, they are the grand master's representative in each of the 151 districts. There's, I believe, 151 districts there that are, they are the Grand Master representative for each of those districts.
right,
They visit the different districts that they're in. They take the message and communicate back and forth with the lodges in that district. And they're, if you will, their liaison between that district, that lodge, and the Grand Master.
So speaking of the leadership positions, because I know you've served from the Grand South, I believe that was in 2017,
Yeah.
And then to the Grand West, as well as the Deputy Grand Master. And then this year, of course, you were the Most Worshipful Grand Master. Tell us what it means to you to be able to serve Texas Masonry at such a large capacity, because it's a very inspirational and it's a high aspiration that some people would love to have.
Wow. You know, it goes back to my roots of growing up at Masonic Common School.
Mm-hmm.
You know, that profound gift that this wonderful fraternity gave me never was lost in my conscience. I didn't know much about it, but I knew that there were these men out there that were responsible for my well-being.
Right.
And as I grew older, I just felt a calling that I needed to be one of them. To anyone that did that much good for that many children,
Right.
I wanted to be a part of that. And so at the age of 18, when I graduated, I sought out Masonry and found out that at that time I had to be 21. So I sort of had to wait my time with patience, if you will,
Right.
Until I was 21. And I turned in my petition and became a Mason at the age of 21 in Mesquite Lodge number 928.
Right.
But that started my journey into Masonry. And of course, none of this would have happened had it not been for my father.
Yeah.
You know, even though I didn't know the man because he died when I was 3.
Mm-hmm.
So I have absolutely no memory of him, but he is the man that laid that cornerstone,
Right.
that built the temple, if you will, that took me into Masonry. But joining just wasn't enough over the years. You had to be patient and find your opportunities and ways to give back. But over the course of the years, I looked for different ways to give my talents to the fraternity and whatever was willing to be received by the people above me. And then at some point I decided, well, you know, with much thought ahead of time, I decided that I wanted to make myself available for the position of Grand Junior Warden, which that's the entry-level position in the Grand Lodge of Texas in elected capacity. And so I traveled the state. I far and wide, and talk to many people, but more than talking to them, I listen to them.
Right.
And I like to use the expression of we have one of these and two of these.
Right.
We need to use them in proportion.
Absolutely.
And I listen to the membership more than I talk to them.
Mm-hmm.
And by that listening, it gave me the, I guess, insight that they had on what they expected their leader to be. And I've never wavered from the thought that I might be the leader of this fraternity, but I'm also the servant. Mm-hmm. And that I serve the membership of the state. It's a big honor, it's a big responsibility, but it's been, I guess, socially, it's been the biggest, happiest part of my life, socially, I could ever expect to have achieved.
So I want to tie back to the pin I had put in charity. And you told us a little bit just now about how you personally were able to contribute to the organization. And we talked a little bit about how the appendant bodies, the larger group, makes a contribution. But I really want to ask you a little bit about contributions by lodges. So lodges are in communities, and those communities are affected by those lodges. If you could tell us maybe a story or a time that you were participating in a lodge that was directly involved with the community.
Well, there are many instances I could give you, but that where the lodge gives back to the community is through in different ways with different lodges. I know in the lodge I was in, the thing that I remember that we did was we volunteered, this back in the day, but we volunteered to help as volunteers in the emergency room of the hospital.
Wow.
Not that we were doing medical services,
Right.
but we were there to just run errands and provide moving people's cars, that kind of stuff.
To help in whatever capacity.
Whatever capacity the hospital wanted us to do. Wow. And we did that. We'd do it with different teams of members, and sometimes our wives would go with us. But it was an example of giving back to the community. And they still do that.
I like that.
Likewise, just this past January, I was in Dallas for a function called Feed the Funnel, and I thought, what a unusual name is that? I didn't really know what it meant, but and I'll explain it here in a minute. But there we had people from all over the Dallas area. I don't remember the numbers now, but just sort of visually thinking about it, there were several hundred people there. And in a matter of like an hour and a half, we used this funnel that we, the organization, that the Dallas Masonic District put together, put these meal kits together where we would put the different mixtures of food through a funnel in proportion to bag these meals up and seal them to give to people in need. And I believe the number, and I might be wrong on this, but it seemed like the number was like 20,000 meals in an hour and a half. We did that many of them.
Yeah, that reminds me of a lodge that I attend, their Fantastic Teeth program.
Yes.
They take over a dozen lodges together, they make an assembly line, and like you said, in an hour and a half, they assemble thousands of kits to give to kids in elementary schools. Toothpaste, toothbrushes, floss, and everything.
On that same note, and if I remember correctly, you were in portion of leadership as well, the Take Time to Read program. And I think that's something that's a very similar program. Tell us a little bit about how that affects the community and what the benevolence that does for the children. Take Time to Read
is a tremendous program that Masonry is, a lot of people don't know, Masonry legitimately claims credit for beginning the public school system in Texas as a country. And that's some of why the lodges are two-story at the time. The lodge would meet upstairs and the school would meet downstairs. and many times paid for by the Masonic membership. That's the genesis of the public school system in Texas. But the the Take Time to Read program was I guess, a benefit of that, because Masonry has always supported public schools and education. So this Take Time to Read program, we go each year to the schools and deliver school supplies, reading incentives, having score sheets, if you will, for the children each year to keep up with the number of minutes they read during the month of March. And then those that read the most are given some, I guess, rewards for their achievements. And it provides another opportunity where it stamps publicly that Masonry is out and about supporting public schools, promoting education, and rewarding the children of our society for what they do well in public schools.
Love that. And I think that's another big point. That kind of goes back to why we wanted to help start our page called King Solomon's Wisdom, and its podcast that goes with it, is just letting the community know what we do, the benevolence that's therein, and also just to educate the community and to create excitement. And I think that's been a huge message that you've had to the Masons of Texas, is to create excitement and that branding that goes around that. Because when you're truly inspired and when you're excited about something, it leads to action. So I know that's the kind of the shortened version of the message, but for the viewers and for the way that you can explain it to the public, what would you tell us kind of about that branding or that excitement around Masonry?
Well, there's too many stories I could tell you of where Masonry has not been outward, if you will. Has been inward in its activity, and we're, I guess, humbled to step out into the public.
Right.
I believe we need to do that proudly, respectfully. That if you have a good man out doing a good deed, or a collection of good men out doing good deeds, that's as it should be.
Right.
And it's commendable for what they're doing.
Right.
But if there's no, and we do not encourage or even suggest that someone raise their hand and say, look at me, look what I've done as a Mason.
Right.
Not that at all. But that if that man is not, I'm going to say, branded some way, whether it be a pin or a ring or a cap or a shirt or some visible representation of what he represents as a fraternity, then it's a lost opportunity to connect the dots between the good deeds of that man,
right,
and I would say the association with the fraternity as being a part of that. That I believe respectfully the fraternity should be recognized for what that good man did in a polite, discreet way. And if that's done in good taste and without any boastfulness,
right,
then people will say, well, John Doe is a good man, and lo and behold, he's also a Mason.
right.
Maybe Masonry is something I need to look into. Or maybe Masonry is something that does more for our society than I know they do.
Right. And I think that's also kind of goes back to a little bit of, unveiling a little bit of what, some people call it a secret society, which it really isn't. It's a society that has some secrets, but most importantly, it's something that does a very big impact on the community. And we don't want to keep that a secret. We want to be able to praise the fraternity. We're not looking to give recognition to one particular person, as you're mentioning. It's more of the benefit of the fraternity and the benefit of the community and all of its members and neighbors nearby. And to me, that's something that's really impressive, especially as a young Mason, which is another reason we wanted to do that as well, is just for the Masonic awareness and education, of people that, of all kinds of different generations can not only be exposed to it, because it's something that we have that, at least in the jurisdiction of Texas, some vary, that we don't do any type of recruiting. We don't go out to ask. It's something that to be one is to ask one to be one type thing. And so speak a little bit about that. I know you kind of told us beforehand about a very touching story about a son that had that kind of a situation waiting to be asked. And as a Mason, we don't approach people to ask them to join the fraternity.
Right. Well, there was a man that worked with me for many years in Austin. And one day he noticed my Masonic ring, and he said, "I didn't know you were a Mason." I said, "Yes, sir, I am." And he says, "My dad was a Mason." He says, and as I was growing up, I wondered about him going to those lodge meetings, and then as I got older, I kept wondering why he wasn't asking me to go with him. Why wasn't he asking me to be a Mason? And I told him, I said, well, we don't ask people to be Masons. You have to ask us to become a member. And he cried. He was devastated. He says, well, my dad is no longer living. And he says, had I known that, I could have asked him, and I could have fellowshipped with him for probably 20 years of his last part of his life. And that opportunity is gone.
Right.
He says, that was it just devastated him. And then there are many stories of that where, we don't want to ask someone to join us, because then we're recruiting like some organizations, and then it's not being critical of that. That's just not us.
Right.
That the mantra of Masonry is that by how you hold yourself out should be if you will, the attraction of someone to be, I want to be like you.
Right.
But they have to know you as a Mason. And if you don't mark yourself some way, and some people are more willing to do that than others.
Right.
Some don't want to mark themselves because maybe they're reluctant that they can't give the right answers, or for other reasons. But then there's several stories I can share with you that where that branding works, and it's worked for me many times. And I know there was a district deputy grand master that mentioned this to me in January, that he'd been going to his bank for several years, making deposits, going to the same teller. I don't remember the names, but the teller that he went to every day, he'd do his business on Fridays, and that went on around to the next week. And then he started wearing a Masonic cap, a cap, just a baseball cap with the Texas flag, sort of like that pin there.
Right.
But he wore that in there one day, and his friend looked up at his hat and said, Bob, I never knew you were a Mason.
Yeah.
And he says, I just never knew. He says, now you know. He says, how do I become one? He says, I'll get you a petition.
Right.
Because he had already known him. He already knew what kind of man Bob was.
Right.
It wasn't a matter of figuring it out. Once he knew Bob was a Mason, I want to be like Bob.
Right. Yeah.
And that's where the dots got connected.
I like that. And to me, it's something that I do think it's very important that living your life Masonically, living by those values, treating all people as equals on the level, and having the Masonic values, when you exude those through your normal day-to-day life, when someone does discover that, and as you say, to mark yourself or to brand, whether it be a key fob, a hat, a license plate, whatever it might be, between Masons, we know each other that, hey, that's also a Mason driving down the road. But to the non-Mason, it can also help, and it shows, people that are living their life in such a way that you kind of want to model yourself after someone like that. And it's kind of the who's who of the history book. If you look through all the famous Masons throughout history, If you were to see a list of all of those kind of put together, you would just say, oh, those are historical people throughout the times. Many of them were Masons.
Right.
And that's really something that as a young Mason and throughout all generations, being able to model yourself and aspire to be someone like that. I mean, you can probably also fill in there as well, but from George Washington to Benjamin Franklin, Mark Twain, Arnold Palmer, I mean, there's a lot, there's hundreds and hundreds you could go through in a list. But I think you're absolutely right. That's something where when people start seeing not only the historical side, but the modern day side, when you're in between passing, and it may not be a famous Mason, it may just be someone like you're saying, the bank teller. I think it was the Grand Master of New York, if I remember correctly.
It was
this is probably some years ago, and you'll probably say it better than I would. But that the greatest generation never spoke about the lodge, the next generation never heard about it, and the millennials don't know where to find one.
Right.
And it's surprising to me because, of course, as Masons, we have resources that we can go in there and find, where our lodge is at. Through different books, there's different electronic versions. We can also contact Grand Lodge to see which lodges are recognized. And they're nearly in every major city you could think of,
Right.
And to some people, they would never, if you went to ask a non-Mason that's never heard of the fraternity, have you ever driven by one, or could you tell me where one's at? Most of them have no idea where they're even at.
We were, in fact, in, I forget the name, I think it was I don't know if this is the case, but I think it was maybe even Cleveland, Texas. Somewhere over in that area. We were going to a lodge for a Grandmaster visit last year. And we stopped and asked the local policeman, where's the Masonic Lodge here in town? I don't know. This is not like Dallas, Texas. This
Right.
is like
Yeah.
Poville, Texas.
Right.
And he didn't know where it was at.
Oh, my goodness.
So I did want to ask you a little bit. People live their life like Masons. People live benevolently. And people love to do charity. But let's say I'm a benevolent, charitable man, and I'm not a Mason. What would entice me, or why would I even be, consider Freemasonry as something that I should join?
Well, I guess the best way I can answer that is the northern jurisdiction of the Scottish Rite fraternity did a survey about 3 years ago, and they surveyed several thousand people, men that were not Masons, and asked them what they might be interested in what kind of organization would they be interested in joining. And I'm really summarizing this, but the takeaway I received from that survey that they did is, I believe it's 72% of all the respondents said that I'm interested in joining an organization that provides fellowship and benevolence. That we can all do benevolent acts by ourselves, but it gets back to you're only as good as the company you keep. If you're doing benevolent acts with others, you're helping each other, you're fellowshipping with them, you're getting to know them, and doing things together. There's togetherness is what Masonry offers as well, as friends, as well as doing common things together that you both care about.
Right.
So would you say Freemasonry is for just about anybody?
Absolutely. There's, regardless of your interest, the requirements, I guess you would say, are only that you ask of your own free will and accord, that we're not hustling you to join,
Right.
and that you believe in a supreme being. You cannot be an atheist. That's the one thing that we will not accept as someone that's not a believer. But beyond that, our arms are as wide open as they can be. Whether you're a Christian, a Catholic, a Jew, a Muslim, whatever, it does not matter to us as long as you believe in deity. I would like to, if I could, share another one of those stories with you, because I think it's very important about the branding.
Yeah.
And that is, back in February, I was at the airport in Houston, and I was looking for, my phone was about dead. It was down to like 1 or 2%. and I was looking for somewhere to plug this charging cord into because I was about to be out of business. And walking around, and this young man we were waiting for the plane, and it had been there a while, and he was just sort of laying down on the floor because there were no seats. And he saw that I was looking for a place to charge his phone. And he looked up at me and he says, you can plug your phone into my laptop computer and charge it that way. And I thought for a moment, well, should I do that? I don't know this man. Of course, I had on a Masonic shirt. Okay. I had branded myself.
Right.
But that didn't register with me with what he was doing. But after he offered that, I finally said, well, it's either that or I'm out of business. So I plugged it in and started talking to him and said, young man, I said, that's very kind of you to do that to a stranger. And he said, you're not a stranger. He says, you're a brother.
Yeah.
So he did that. I didn't know he was a Mason because he wasn't branded.
Right.
But he knew I was. And he saw me in distress. And he came to my relief. But I would never have known he was a Mason had he not said, that's what we do for brothers.
Wow.
And so we developed a friendship right there on the spot. I still would have thought highly of him because of what he did.
Right.
But it just sort of stepped it up a notch because he also did it because he saw a brother in distress.
Right.
You got a story, Rock, of whenever you personally felt the benevolence of Freemasonry?
And there's a lot of different examples. One that comes to mind is, and it's kind of a similar story where, whether you're in your hometown or whether you're traveling, right? Masonry is worldwide. It's in many major cities and in a majority of countries around the world. It's not just a U.S. fraternity. But as I was traveling through a different state at the time, I was actually over in California. I was curious and I wanted to look around, and I went to one of the lodges, and as a Mason, you're able to visit. You're able to go to the lodges in either other states or even other countries. And I happened to stop by at one of them, and they actually were having a stated meeting that night. So I actually got to enter, and I recognized myself as a Mason and showed them not only from knowledge and some of the things that where I came from in Texas and my history and what I've done, and they welcomed me in like family. I mean, it was like I've known them my whole life. Never spoke to them a day in my life. Never talked to them ahead of time. Didn't know their names. Walked in and they treated me like I was family. And so that's something to me that's also just special, knowing that whether it's down the street, another city, another state, or even if you're visiting, let's say you want to go to England or wherever it might be, Australia, many cities around the world, many countries around the world, it gives you it's like a place of home.
A sense of at home, yeah.
And so.
No, it reminds me of a story I definitely wanted to share my 2 cents.
Yeah.
When I was in D.C. as a poor and penniless intern,
Yeah.
every now and then I would decide that I wanted to go visit a lodge and go see a stated meeting and visit something new. And just about every time I went, the brethren would ask me, how far did you come from? And I would tell them, I spent 30, 40 minutes on the rail. I said, no, we're driving you home. And you're taking the leftovers too. And so it warms my heart that people that I've never met before, I have no idea who they are. And they're treating me like I'm their family, like I'm their best friend.
Yeah.
So, thank you guys for sharing that.
Absolutely. I guess, so let me kind of turn it back to you then. So what are some of the things in the community that you might have seen that a Mason, that whether it's one of the more honorable things or something that was selfless or in some way that was giving, either to a person or to the community in such a way that left a remarkable impression on your mind?
What comes to mind right off the bat would be the helping of the children in the hospitals.
Yeah.
That I remember the story of there's this one young lady that was a patient. It's not directly answering your question, but it sort of is. We had a patient of the month. They'd bring in, the doctors would brief us of what happened to them before and their progress, and they brought them in towards the end whenever they were finished with their medical services, and this young lady come in. Before she came in, they gave us a video presentation of what she looked like when she was younger and what all they'd done to help her surgically and so forth. And she came from, I believe it was Guatemala, and she had a severe case of cleft lip and cleft palate, and she just looked very scary, I guess is maybe the right word. And down there, she was shunned by society, and brought her up there, and through the surgery, she was really brought back to complete fulfillment, as visibly as well as physically.
Wow.
And she came in to talk to us, and she had the biggest smile in the world, and she had learned some English when she had been there. She had been in the hospital for quite some time. And the therapist that had worked with her said, well, do you want to tell these Shriners what, you have any words to say for them? She says, well, first I want to thank y'all for giving my life back, saving my life. But also, and someone, I think from one of the other board members asked her, well, what are you going to do when you get home? She says, well, when I get home next week, I'm going to the prom.
Wow. Yeah. That's awesome.
So that is just an example of where collectively maybe Masons and gave back profoundly to that society.
That's incredible.
I think you touched on something really important that maybe not many people think about when they think of Freemasonry. We think that, men are Freemasons and they help their community, women and children. But, Freemasonry really is a whole family event. We have organizations for everybody. So if you could talk a little bit more about, that Freemasonry really is about the whole family.
Yes, it is. We have in Arlington, Texas, we have a retirement center that both aged Masons as well as their widows are afforded the opportunity to go there and live their final years. It's regardless of their ability to pay. They if they're poor and penniless, they go in there just like the orphanage I went into. They can get in there and live and have a really good last years of their life, not having to worry about where they're going to get their meal or being cared medically for.
Amazing.
Speaking of cost or financial obligation, going back to the Shriners Hospital and the Scottish Rite Hospital, talk a little bit, because that's behind the scenes where that's not something that we talk about. It's not something that we broadcast. But for the children that are in need, how does that work with the family?
Well, over the years, it used to be, regardless of anything, that we didn't even take insurance or whatever, whether it be Scottish Rite or Shrine. Now if a family does have insurance, we will take that insurance, but say it had a 10% or say $1,000 deductible or whatever, the family is not even asked to pay that difference. The only thing we take is whatever the insurance would pay, and nothing more. So still the family is out nothing for what we do for them.
And that's something that's an incredible part, not only for the community, but for the families and what that means, because some of these children and the families themselves might not be able to go through those types of treatment without the benevolence of the Shriners and the Scottish Rite members because they're the ones that are funding that. Is that right?
Right, and it's also all of these hospitals, and they're all around the United States. They provide world-class service. If you remember the volcanoes that I believe it was Guatemala that erupted, and many people died from that, but some children got severely burned in that. And the doctors from the Rite Hospital in Galveston, with the help of the federal government, flew down there and picked up those kids and brought them back to Galveston and saved their life. At no cost.
Wow.
Because that's what we're supposed to do.
I love that.
That's great.
And it shows the reach. You know, that's not something that they're doing just for their city. That's it's a worldwide reach. And something I go back to with the family side, and that we do keep involved, whether it's the children that are in need, or if it's also the family of children here, or the wives or widows or family in general. It is something that's a very important value to us, that we do have the family involved. So my question would be, you know, what other parts of Masonry have women that would be not only involved, you know, let's say out in the dining room, things like that, but they can actually be engaged, from Eastern Star to Amaranth, or some of the other that you might be able to speak to. What are some of those ways that we can also continue the involvement and the engagement to get people excited about the different appendant bodies of Masonry?
Okay. Before I want to add something to the family. You know, part of the obligation of Masonry, which we take that obligation with our hand on the sacred book.
Right.
Okay. And part of that obligation is that we will take care of our widows and orphans.
Right.
And I've just earlier explained how we do that. And I'm a poster child for helping our orphans.
Right.
So that's an obligation that we take.
Absolutely.
And we take it strongly.
Absolutely.
And people that aren't a member of our fraternity might not know that. But your question about how these other appendant bodies, how they get engaged. Well, of course, first off, that we have the Eastern Star. That's a co-ed, if you will, appendant body of Masonry. The Eastern Star does many different programs for society as well. There's, we mentioned the Scottish Rite. The York Rite, there's the chapter and council and commandery. Well, the Royal Arch Masons are the ones that own and operate the retirement center in Arlington. So that's sort of their piece of the puzzle of benevolence.
Right.
And the commandery or Knights Templar, one of the many things they do is they have an eye bank. That they provide, ultimately end up helping provide the gift of sight to people.
Yeah.
So but there's every single body of Masonry and the appendant bodies all have benevolence as a thread that runs through them, and most of that benevolence is helping children.
So I think that also kind of reaches, because we've talked about, of course, the Masons, their families, you know, going one more
community.
layer out, the community, the people that are in the community that might be interested. How does someone even receive more information, or how do they educate themselves? What should they do, you know, as someone that might be interested? Because I'm sure there could be some of our viewers that watch this that are not Masons, and they're interested. What advice would you give them?
Well, several different ways. I would ask them to seek us out, and they seek us out in different ways. But they might know where there's a Masonic lodge in their neighborhood, in their city. Every Masonic lodge posts the contact information on the door, as well as the nights they meet and the times they meet. So you're more than welcome to come up and just poke your head in the door that night.
Right.
To say, I'd like to visit, see, get to know you guys, and see what y'all are all about. So that's one way. You can also find us on, most lodges have a Facebook page, or you can find them on Facebook. Those are the two ways I would suggest off the top of my head to seek us out. You'll find us in your community and in many places, like this town we're in here. There's 4 lodges in this town.
Right.
People just in the different neighborhoods know where they're at. Come see us. They don't have to have an invitation.
Right.
Right.
And I think that's kind of the main point, and you can probably speak more on that as well. But a lot of people have almost a misconception or a misrepresentation in their mind
That
that
they have to be invited.
exactly, and a lot of people are waiting to be invited, whether it's from someone like you mentioned before, whether it's their father or just in general, they think that a friend would one day just magically walk up and say, "Hey, we want you," and we. Not only do we not do that, we're in many states, it's actually strictly advised to not do that, to approach someone to ask. And I think that's also what makes something that, as a clearing up the air from from a misconception standpoint, making sure that you ask if you're interested, right? If it's someone that that's a Mason, or if you see them being branded, or like you say to mark, whether it's a ring or a hat or whatever it might be. Those are the people that have not only the knowledge or the light that could answer those questions, but those are the people that you can approach and feel free to approach them, right?
I think it might sound a little silly saying this, especially after all we've talked about, but I did want to ask this question directly. We talk about all the great things that Masonry does for the world, and a lot of people, not in Freemasonry, might talk about all the things that are missing from the world. Why does the world need more Freemasonry?
Why does the world need more Freemasonry? Because Masonry, we actually, through the organization which we are, we end up creating leaders within our fraternity. And leaders within our fraternity sometimes end up becoming leaders in society. Again, when you walk through that door, you might be the city manager or the mayor or whatever of a particular town, but when you walk in that door, you're on the level. You're on the,
right.
But through the network of people you get to know there, we're all about helping each other in whatever ways that we can. But why the world needs more Masonry is because we have no agenda other than leaving society better than we found it, and fellowship with other men.
Mm-hmm.
Wow.
And that fellowship with good men is what our country needs, because I told people that weren't active anymore. I said, well, you aren't coming to our meetings anymore. Why not? And I said, where are you going that you're getting something better than you get from us? I want to know about it because I want to come.
Right.
And I heard crickets.
Mm-hmm.
And the guy started coming back.
No, I love that answer. I really do. As a young Mason, being in a lodge and knowing that I'm of the youngest people in that whole lodge, I have a lot to learn. And so it was huge when my lodge elected me as secretary because I didn't know what I was doing.
Yeah.
But luckily, I had lots of wonderful brethren there to walk me along the way. And it wasn't so much just that I could serve my lodge, but the skills that I was gaining as secretary of the lodge, I was able to use them in my own personal life. So I think not only is the lodge a great place for us to give, but I think the lodge can teach us a whole lot about ourselves that we didn't even know we needed to know.
Right.
Yeah, it's an excellent point because it does make you into a leader in many aspects, right? It teaches you the Masonic values. It teaches you, how to live the righteous life.
How to be a part of a community.
How to be a part of the community. And it does create, that leader. It takes that leader from within and it sharpens that tool. And I think that's something that also inspired me, whether it, was friends around or family that might have been in before. But how do you make yourself the best potential version of yourself that you can be? And Mason really does it develops that skill from within. And I think that's kind of what I want to transition into next would be, what have you learned, or what values have you taken away, whether it's back from the Masonic home and school or just going through the line of leadership? What message would you give to echo to Masons and non-Masons alike for values and moral purposes?
It has, I have lived benevolence, not again back from where I was the recipient of it, but that instilled in me the desire that how how incredibly impactful that was in my life.
Mm-hmm.
I saw how it helped me.
Mm-hmm.
It literally did save my life. And that given an opportunity to be a part of Masonry allows me to pay it forward.
Mm-hmm.
And pay it forward in every possible way I can.
Mm-hmm.
And right now I'm paying it forward by serving the position I'm in, because I offered my skills to the fraternity, and experience that I had in management, from not only from a lodge but through my career.
Mm-hmm.
And the fraternity saw fit to give me this position.
Mm-hmm.
And but it's given me the platform to pursue and continue the marketing and branding of our fraternity, and also the promoting of benevolence.
Mm-hmm.
And it's benevolence is so sincere and heartwarming. And were it not for benevolence, our fraternity would not be what it is.
Mm-hmm.
I like that. So I think that for the people that are watching, I want to ask, before we kind of wrap up, there's one other question I do want to ask. What would be something that you yourself personally went through, what was either maybe heart-touching, or something that that really shook you to the core? That's something either that happened to you, or maybe that you did for someone else that made you feel good, or something that maybe that you had witnessed. And it doesn't even have to be a Mason, but someone that was that was living those Masonic values.
Could you ask that again?
Sure, yeah. I mean, just in a day-to-day life, the Masonic values. What's something that, whether it was something that gave you an inspiration, or someone that you looked up to, maybe it was as a Masonic figure that you learned after, or someone that was living those Masonic values that really hit home for you, that struck you to the core, that not only either made you proud to be a Mason, or that made you want to become a Mason.
Well, I go back to my father.
Yeah.
He, I'm the youngest of 13 kids.
Mm-hmm.
Wow.
Same parents. And of course, being the youngest at my age now, many of those are no longer living, as well as my parents. But I'm going to say the wisdom that my father must have had to become a Mason. He could not read or write. He was a day laborer type of guy. Just did what he could to get by. But when he walked in, and I wasn't around when he did, but when he walked through that door, he was on a level with the guys that were doctors and lawyers and presidents of the bank and so forth.
Mm-hmm.
And but he saw the benevolence of Masonry, and he wanted to be a part of it.
Mm-hmm.
Little did he know that most of his kids were grown before he passed away. Mm-hmm. But there were 3 of the 13 that were still at home.
Mm-hmm.
And so how he made such a profound impact on my life is he provided that path for me.
Right.
My life was not really much different than many other people's lives in that day and time in the 50s. But the difference was I had the safety net of Masonry. Mm-hmm. That everybody else, not everybody else, but most other people might not have had.
Right. In
that same situation. So I don't feel bad. I feel blessed and privileged that he left me that path to be able to go to the Masonic Home School. So he's my hero. He's my mentor, even though I never had a conversation with him. Mm. He's the man that had the cornerstone of why I am who I am today.
That's incredible.
Beautiful, yeah.
And it's like you're saying, it's the cornerstone, almost like he gave you the moral compass and showed the pathway and kind of where the light takes that pathway and laid the way for you. And I think that's incredible. So I wanted to thank everybody also for tuning in for King Solomon's Wisdom. Stay tuned, of course, for the second part. But what we wanted to do, of course, is to help educate about the fraternity, to show the different parts of what we do, in the public and the benevolence that we have. Not only to spread awareness and to create excitement, but most importantly to educate the community.
Yeah.
So we want to thank you so much, Most Worshipful, for joining us, and we look forward to seeing you in the second part.
Thank you.
Good afternoon, everyone. Thank you for tuning back in to King Solomon's Wisdom podcast. This is the second section of the Grand Master, the Most Worshipful Grand Master of all Masons in Texas, from the Most Worshipful Grand Lodge of Texas, Paul D. Underwood. So we're going to go ahead and get started for this one. What are some of the most significant factors that you see kind of affecting whether it's lodge engagement or getting people excited about Masonry?
Marketing. That as we market our fraternity, it both excites our membership as well as the non-Mason, because it tells us connects the dots between who we are as a man and who we are as a Mason. So that's what marketing does, and branding.
Something else for Masonry. So this is a fraternity that's been going since time immemorial. Tell us a little bit of kind of the original kind of the start date for Masonry, and do you see these times as any different from times in the past?
I don't. I think the only thing that has changed from time immemorial to today is technology. And of course, different liberties that man has achieved from the beginning of time to now. But the principles of Masonry, I think, were evident when Masonry was first begun, and I believe that where we've changed is through technology and innovation in society.
So Masons were always at the forefront of technology, but how about today? How can we involve Masons in technology like we haven't before?
Well, we have a program that was developed, released in February this year, that was created by a partnership of the Scottish Rite of northern and southern jurisdictions, combined with the Shriners International. They realized, rightfully so, that, of course, their membership comes from Masonry. And for them to have a bigger population of people to consider being a part of that independent body, they needed to do what they could to help prosper Masonry, Blue Lodge Masonry, by making it more aware to the non-Mason. And so they created a program they released in February. It's called beafreemasonnow.org. And I would suggest that you take a look at that. It is an outstanding product. And Blue Lodges across the country, across the world, will be the beneficiaries, as well as the Scottish Rite and the Shrine. But it's a partnership of all three of us to basically spread the word of what we do, what we are, and what we have to offer today to someone that's seeking more light about what we're about.
So we talk a lot about to the non-Mason. We've directed a lot of this to somebody who's not aware. We talk a lot about charity. We've talked a lot about benevolence, and a lot of people who are going to be listening to this are Masons and have heard a lot of the stuff we're talking about. Maybe some words of wisdom to the individual Mason who goes, yeah, I'm charitable. Yeah, I'm benevolent. Yeah, I help my lodge. What else doesn't he know?
If all we do in our lodges is open our lodge, read our minutes from the prior meeting, pay our bills, and go home, we're not providing any reason for that brother to come back to Lodge next time. What we need to contemplate, and I would suggest that lodges ask this question at the end of a lodge: what was the benefit of this meeting to you? In other words, what would you tell your brother that didn't come tonight? What did he miss?
Yeah.
If you can't tell him, my brother, you missed a great meeting tonight because of X, Y, and Z, that it was more than what I just explained. That's how you're going to excite them, and they'll look forward to coming to the next meeting, because I'll be there.
Yeah.
Because you've piqued my interest in what I missed, and I'm going to be looking to see what's there for next time. So we have an obligation to provide more than the necessary business aspects of our meetings. We have to provide some education and I say tasteful entertainment. It could be anything, someone coming in and talking about their profession, outsider, that provides information about whatever it might be, a car salesman, a tax preparer, a doctor, just talking about their vocation and how people can ask questions and learn a little bit about that. Not that that consumes the whole lodge meeting, but that it's some information that people go, wow, that was entertaining, that was informational. I like that. Talking about doing wills, have an attorney that's a member, talk about just some things you need to think about in doing a will and the risks of not doing one. That kind of information.
From some of the lodges that you maybe either visited or that you might have heard of, what are some activities, whether it's some type of activity in the lodge or maybe some type of activity outside the lodge that helps bring the brethren together?
Again, it gets back to the charitable things, whether it be something as simple, I say simple, like the Fantastic Teeth program that draws multiple lodges together to package those things together to take to the public schools and the community. That fellowship and just camaraderie that takes place during that activity is talked about for weeks to come. And that's one example. The other thing is just the reach out to many lodges do fundraisers and raise funds and create say, for example, meal packages to take to families in their community that are in need. Sort of a unique thing that I saw one lodge that did is they have a haunted house at their lodge.
That's cool.
And where they have shrine clowns there that entertain the kids, balloons and stuff like that. And I know that lodge, it was a small community lodge. I believe it might be Buna Lodge, B-U-N-A. But nevertheless, they said that they had over 200 people pass through their lodge in open house because of, not open house, but they did their open house on Halloween.
Wow. That's awesome.
And knocking on the doors.
I love that. And speaking of brotherhood and membership, and I know we mentioned Eastern Star and the chapter council, things like that, other parts of Masonry that are appendant bodies. Speaking of appendant bodies, I know that you're involved in a wide variety of appendant bodies. From AMD to the Masonic Knights of the Scarlet Cord, the Order of Scotland, National Sojourner, some of these other ones that maybe not all Blue Lodge members have heard of. So this maybe question is more for the Blue Lodge members. Tell us a little bit about what created the excitement in you and what made you want to join some of those appendant bodies.
Well, first off, I am a joiner. And what I mean by that is the good Lord has blessed me with not unlimited resources, but with resources to be able to contribute to these other different functions that go on. And I know I hear people that say that, well, you can ask a Mason, why aren't you a Shriner? Okay, why aren't you a Yorkite? There's nothing wrong with that because you're already a part of the base foundational family. But the answer you get back sometimes is, well, I don't have time. And my answer back to them is, you might not have time right now, but if you can help contribute to the support of that organization, that appendant body, until such time as you can get involved, you will be helping that organization, and you will also be enriching your life because you're providing what help you can provide today for such time that you can provide your time and talents. So that's why I'm a member of so many of them. I don't have the participation activity in all of them as much as I am in Grand Lodges in the past few years, but I do in the past and will in the future spend time in each of those appendant bodies to the best of my ability and best of my time available.
I do want to touch on that because once you become a Master Mason, now you're open to all these appendant bodies, but when is the right time to join? Should I join right as I become a Master Mason? Should I wait, after I'm a past Master? To the people who are going through their journey, when's the right time?
That's a person would answer that personally for themselves. But I would say this, I've heard the criticism, if you will, that will, and I'll use Shriners as an example, that the Shriners still are members, right? And I've heard that many times. And what I've said to people that said that, I said, well, if you're creating a program in your lodge to where you've captured their attention and interest, they're not going anywhere. If you do in fact lose not a member, because you have to be a member to be a Shriner, right?
In the first place.
But if you lose their attendance because they join the shrine, I'm just using that as an example. It's because the shrine in that hypothetical situation is offering them something that interests them more than the activities that are going on in your lodge. And so to me, the answer to that is not complaining about the shrine folks stealing your members, but what can I do to enliven the activities of my lodge to where people will want to do both. And I do both. So I just think that it's not a truly a fair criticism to complain about another appendant body taking someone away from Blue Lodge. And it's like protecting your kids from the public by teaching them homeschool. I'm not against homeschool, but if you're teaching them homeschool to protect them from the world, sooner or later they got to get out there. Right? Maybe that's a poor analogy, but nevertheless.
No, I think that's an excellent point, and that's really it. Kind of leads into another point there. What would you say at fraternity as a whole, Freemasonry, Blue Lodge, Scottish Rite, York Rite, all the different appendant bodies? What makes Freemasonry unique or distinctive from some of the other social orders that exist? Whether it be whether you want to name a couple or if you want to keep that kind of broad, but say Rotary Club, things like that, which are incredible organizations as well. What would you say is something that if someone's maybe interested in one or either, what would you say that makes Freemasonry unique or distinct?
Well, maybe not unique or more distinct than unique, but is that you have to ask to join. Of course, the other organizations, I believe, have the prerogative to solicit members. We want you to be one of us because of what you see in us, and that you want to be a part of that goodness and contribution to mankind. But there's many organizations like that are civic organizations that help society in their own way. And many of us are members of that as well. So it's not necessarily an either or. In fact, you can be a member of them as well, and it's not going it's not going to exclude you from being a Mason. So we do, in fact, many of our members are members of these other civic social organizations.
In the historical version of Freemasonry, whether it be some of the famous Masons that were involved, whether it be different parts of Masonry, what do you see that attracts people to want to join? Of the variety of different reasons people may join, what do you see as some of the common reasons, or what would you tell a non-Mason that the fraternity has to offer?
Back in the day, if you will, why people were attracted to join, I believe, was because the leaders of their community, their states, their country were Masons, and they were visible as such. And I think somewhere along the way that visibility has diminished, and we need to work towards rekindling that visibility in a respectful way. Because today there are many leaders in our community that are Masons and Shriners and York Rite and Scottish Rite members and leaders of those pendant bodies that people don't know that.
So to those leaders, both the leaders in our governments and our societies and our world and our communities, and the leaders in Freemasonry, Willis, they give back to us. Well, what words of wisdom would you give for them to give, for them to give more, right? I mean, obviously we don't want to steal their lives away, but for somebody who's already giving and feels like, can I give any more? What would you say to them?
Well, something that I have worked on this year to put together is to bring the local leaders of this community here where we stand together. And there are several members, the outgoing sheriff and outgoing county judge and several past mayors. And outgoing because they retired. They served their community for many, many years, and just it was their choice to retire. But get those people together, as well as business leaders in town, that everybody knows them in the community as movers and shakers. And I want to get those people together and put together a video that the community can see, and have them talk about what Masonry has meant to them in their life, and what they've done within Masonry during the years that they've been a member.
And I know something for the family side of things is also, it's very important that the family is not only involved, but the family does also support, not only the Freemason through his journey joining, but as you go through the ranks of leadership, whether it be at the local lodge level or even at the state lodge level. You probably of all people know, and of course your amazing wife and the family that's around you, how important that it is to have not only family involvement, but the family to support the journey. Tell us a little bit about kind of through that journey and your travels and things like that, how your wife has helped support and to play a big part and help you in Masonry.
Well, my wife and I have been married, next year will be 50 years. We were married when we were 19 years old. So she claims that when she married me, shortly thereafter, she's been basically involved in Masonry since I've been 21. So for 48 of those 50 years, she's been a Masonic wife. And she has been so supportive of that. She's been with me to lodge meetings where we have social gatherings before lodge, and she meets with the other lodge member wives during those meetings. And they create bonds that last a lifetime due to that fellowship before and after lodge. And the other community events that the lodges do that they do together with their wives. So the wives doesn't just sit home and wait for you to get back. most of them today are engaged in most everything that Masonry does, especially the benevolence and the fundraising and the social participation in the community.
Could you actually dive in a little bit more into that, as far as what kind of events, what kind of programs that lodges can hold for their members to bring their whole family? I know a couple of lodges out there, you see lots of men, but at the dinner, where are the wives and where are the children? So for the lodges that could use a little bit more family attendance, what could they do to maybe foster that attendance?
Well, the first thing they need to do is want to do that. Okay? But, and I don't say that in a critical way, but I'll give you a specific example. I'm past master of Johnson City 561 in Johnson City, Texas. And something we do there every year is during the holiday season, there's like a little carnival there. And we do turkey legs and so forth there. And other lodges do similar type things, but the wives are involved with that shoulder to shoulder and meeting the community and I know there's one lodge out in the Abilene area that gives away free chicken legs. On the town square in a particular weekend that there's a lot of people there on the square.
Oh, wow.
But, and they do that just as sort of a token give back to the community, but the people of the community look forward to that every year. And it's a big event in that little town. So it's not all about raising funds. It's having some fun, wholesome fun, with your wife and your kids as well. Can participate in this. It's limited only by your imagination, what you can do. It doesn't have to be a fundraiser. It can be something you do to help your community. There's other lodges that adopt a particular section of the highways, the state highways.
Clean up.
And they clean up that section of highway. And that's not just the members, that's the members, their wives, their kids, their friends, and so forth. That anybody that wants to come and participate, then usually they'll have some breakfast and lunch afterwards to do that. So it's more than just helping the community. It's also bonding your families together and creating and reinforcing those friendships, as well as your friends that come. Some of them decide, well, hey, I might want to be one of these guys as well. So that's...
Yeah, no, that's how lodges can be more engaged with not just themselves, but with their families.
right.
And you actually touched up on a question that I was right about to ask you. Members might be engaged in their lodge, but lodges not all the time are engaged in their district with other lodges. But I think you touched up on community events and being able to hold events that are not just for the lodge and not just for fundraising, but rather for fun and for community.
Right. And, there's nothing to say that you can't have a dance or any type of, or a domino event or
a night out or a movie night.
Yeah,
Right.
Yeah. It's just, you have to decide we want to do this. It is a way to bring our membership together, bring our families together, and get to know each other outside of this tiled room.
Right.
That's the value add that many lodges offer that we may not know about.
Right. For lodges that are also looking to not only strengthen their lodge between the members, but for a growing lodge, what would you say would involving the family and having them around and having activities in and outside the lodge, do you think that helps the growth and promotes the growth of the lodge?
Absolutely it does, because I'll give you an example of another lodge here in town, and it's Sunset Lodge, and I'm a member of that lodge as well. That lodge, I was over there one night, and that lodge they do an incredible job of, the ladies pride themselves in creating like a gourmet meal for the people that come to lodge. And those ladies are many. I'd say probably active members are 10 or 12 at least that show up regularly. But I was in that lodge one night and standing in line waiting to pay my contribution and eat. And there was a couple in line ahead of me. The guy's a past master of another lodge here in town, but they were over visiting that lodge. And somebody asked the brother when he was going to join Sunset Lodge. And he says, well, I don't know. And the wife popped out and said, I've already joined it. And he can come as my guest, or he can join at a later time. And he answered back, he says, well, then I guess that settles it. I'm going to be turning my petition. She was so engaged with, because they'd visited there several times, and she was engaged with working with the ladies that did the meals, and developed a big friendship. And frequently we'd come out of the lodge meetings, and they would say something like, well, go back in there, we're not done socializing. So they were having so much fun and enjoying each other that that's one of the blessings that lodges can deliver to their lodge family if they just think about it and figure out ways and which ways work best for them.
Perfect. And I think that is an incredible golden nugget there for lodges that are looking to either be more active or to grow, whether it's between themselves as members or just to grow the brotherhood themselves, that involving the family and involving each other with activities, whether it be at the lodge or going out to have a fun night, whether it's movies or having a golf night or whatever it might be, just having that camaraderie and that brotherhood is a golden nugget to help lodges grow and to help Masonry as a whole. So I want to thank you again so much for not only sharing the knowledge and the wisdom and the light that you have, but also joining us on King Solomon's wisdom. It means a lot to us, Most Worshipful, and we want to thank you again, because it's out of the sincerity of our heart that it makes us very, very thoroughly excited that you're here with us today. So thank you for helping us create excitement in Masonry.
Thank you very much. Very, very much.
Thank you.
Thank you so much for tuning back in and watching King Solomon's Wisdom podcast. We also have our page on Facebook as well as the group. And today we are honored to have one of the most well-respected men in Texas Freemasonry, our Most Worshipful Grand Master, Paul D. Underwood of the Most Worshipful Grand Lodge of Texas. It's such a pleasure to have you on, not only for the show, but just in support and helping create excitement about Masonry. It's something I know during your year that we wanted to achieve, and this is one way we wanted to help build to that mission, to that goal. So thank you so much for being on. If you have any kind of closing or final remarks for our viewers or just Masons around the world that you might like to speak about.
Thank you. I do. The theme this year is, of course, create excitement.
Right.
And we've evolved with the landscape that has been provided to us. Mm-hmm. But, what sort of created the genesis of that theme was I was going on TV a couple, 3 years ago, waiting to be interviewed on a local broadcast, and a lady ahead of me was asking me what I was there for, and I told her I was there to talk about the Shrine Circus, and asked what she was there for, and she said, I'm here to create excitement. And I thought, what could that be? And she said, well, young man, she says, nothing in this world ever happens until people get excited. She says, I'm here to create excitement. And I thought, I want to use that. Mm-hmm. And so here we are with our own version of creating excitement.
Right.
And that's been an evolution from the beginning of the year. But, you know, people in Masonry have to get excited about what the opportunities are, what the future's about, and what we can do to help society, and get excited about it. Then excitement will turn into action, and action will turn into good deeds.
Right.
So that's the motive for creating excitement. You know, there's a website out there called beafreemason.org that was created in partnership with the Southern Jurisdiction of Scottish Rite, as well as Shriners International. The leaders of those three appendant bodies put their money and talents and resources into creating that website. And anybody that has even a remote interest in Masonry ought to check it out. Because I believe it will answer many of your questions. And if it's doing its job, it will create excitement for you regarding Freemasonry. Also appreciate very much King Solomon's wisdom providing this venue for this podcast, and it's using your Facebook page and your Facebook group to help promote excitement in Masonry. I'm excited myself about this. You've created excitement in me. I thank you all for that.
It comes full circle.
Yes, sir. Yes, sir.
Yeah, from your excitement, we got our action, and from our action, hopefully we'll make some good deeds.
Absolutely. So again, thank everybody for watching. We look to see you in the next episode, and we hope that you enjoyed it. Again, this is our Most Worshipful Grand Master, Paul D. Underwood of the Most Worshipful Grand Lodge of Texas. Again, thank you so much.
It's been
Thank you
a
both.
pleasure. Thank you.
Thank you.